So this is a case study in character likability, specifically the character introduction of Marty McFly in Back to the Future, a movie we all know and love. So when it comes to Back to the Future, the DeLorean actually goes back in time at about minute 22. So before minute 22, we are with Marty, we're learning about Marty, we're getting to know him, and we're falling in love with him because the filmmakers have used so many different techniques to really increase the character likability. So that's what I want to dive into today and pick apart, so let's jump into it. So the first little moment of the movie, before we even see Marty, is the camera goes through this failed Rube Goldberg machine in Doc's garage lab. And this basically sets the tone of the movie. It lets us know that it's going to be a movie that doesn't take itself very seriously. It's going to be funny, but also is going to have something to do with science or engineering or something like that. We also see on the TV, the newscaster talks about stolen plutonium. And at that point, we've created a question mark in the mind of our audience. We've basically created a contract with them, basically telling them by the end of the movie, at least some point before the end of the movie, you'll understand what happened to this stolen plutonium. So it really just primes the audience for comedy and some element of mystery. So Marty's initial introduction, about 3 minutes into the movie, it actually opens up on his feet, and we don't even see his face yet. And so we see that it's some kid who's wearing cool Nikes. He's holding a skateboard, so he already has some sort of like edge, cool factor to him. He's walking into the lab. He notices that everything is kind of messed up. He puts the skateboard on the ground, and the skateboard rolls and hits a case that says plutonium. So already we've answered the question of what happened to the stolen plutonium from the newscast. We've just answered it, but what we've done is that we've added the element of mystery to Marty. So Marty is now associated in some way with this plutonium. So even though it's not him stealing it or anything like that, we've put him in a location that has the stolen plutonium in it. So we want to know more about it. We want to know how Marty is involved with this plutonium. So we've created a question in the mind of our audience. So we've given him a cool factor. We've created a question. And we've also made him funny. He walks in, he notices everything is gone wrong, and he plugs in his guitar to this giant speaker that's like the size of the wall, and he takes everything up as far as it can go, and he strums the guitar, and he flies back across the room. It's a silly sequence, and he looks up, and the speaker is completely destroyed, and he pulls down his aviators. Again, he's wearing aviators. He's a cool guy, but he's cool and clumsy. He's like a blend of the two, which is interesting. He pulls down the aviators. He looks at the destroyed speaker, and he says, "Rock and roll." And that moment is just a fun, silly moment that adds comedy to his character. Again, we're blending this kind of cool guy with this kind of clumsy guy, and he's funny. So in that scene alone, we've given an element of mystery. We've made him cool. And we've made him funny. And then there's a quick moment where Doc calls on the phone.
Where are you?
Thank God I found you. Listen, can you meet me at Twin Pines Mall tonight at 1:15? I've made a major breakthrough and I'll need your assistance.
Wait a minute, 1:15 in the morning?
And really that quick little interaction is a little bit more about exposition, but we do keep Marty funny in that scene.
That reminds me, Marty, you better not hook up to the amplifier. There's a slight possibility of overload.
Yeah. I'll keep that in mind.
Good.
Again, we've added a little bit more comedy in that scene. And that's a good example, too, of any time you have an interaction that's basically just for exposition, make some jokes in there, have some fun, add some comedy, because if it's straight exposition with no comedy, it's boring to watch.
Are those my clocks I hear?
Yeah. It's 8 o'clock.
Perfect. My experiment worked. They're all exactly 25 minutes slow.
Wait a minute, Doc. Are you telling me that it's 8:25?
Precisely.
Damn. I'm late for school.
So he panics and he runs out. The next little bit is just him getting to school before he gets caught by Strickland. And what's interesting in that scene is that's like when the Power of Love starts jamming out, and he runs outside and he starts sketching on the back of a truck, I believe, in that scene. So he takes his skateboard, and he's grabbing onto the truck, and he's going down the street. And as a kid who I had never seen anything like that before when I first saw this movie, since then I'd played Tony Hawk, and the world of skateboarding was more popular later on. But seeing someone on a skateboard grabbing onto a car and going down the street, that was so cool the first time you saw it. So again, you're adding a cool factor, some sort of edge factor, and also the resourcefulness is really impressive there. So Marty is resourceful because he's late to school, and the fastest way he can get there, instead of just skateboarding the entire way, he grabs onto a car while he's skateboarding. A very resourceful thing, and we like seeing resourcefulness there. There's also a bit of comedy when he's on his way to school. He sees some women in a yoga class, and he waves to them. The driver of the car looks back and sees him, and he just kind of he's like, yeah, what are you going to do about it? So there's more elements of comedy. The song, everything in that scene is just exciting and fun. And then he gets to the school, and Jennifer stops him at the front.
Marty, don't go this way. Strickland's looking for you. If you get caught, it'll be 4 tardies in a row.
So they sneak in around back. They're going down the halls. And he says something about Doc Brown, and that's when Strickland jumps in and grabs him.
Am I to understand you're still hanging around with Dr. Emmett Brown McFly?
This scene with Strickland is very good. It is such a quick scene that adds in so many different character likability moments. It's really impressive. So the first thing that happens is Strickland gives them both tardy slips. So Strickland is now in power, and Marty, we realize, is an underdog in that moment. So the second thing that happens is that Strickland says,
this so-called Dr. Brown is dangerous. He's a real nutcase. You hang around with him, you're going to end up in big trouble.
Oh, yes, sir.
That example of Marty being flippant to authority, again, gives him a little bit more edge. So we like that edge, especially with an underdog. We know that he shouldn't be mouthing off to the principal.
You've got a real attitude problem, McFly. You're a slacker. You remind me of your father when he went here. He was a slacker, too.
Can I go now, Mr. Strickland?
And that, again, adds an element of Marty being an underdog. It also adds an element of past pain. So we talked about past pain being present, but not in-your-face melodramatic. Well, if he's saying that Marty's dad is a slacker, we now know that for, 16, 17 years, however old Marty is, for his entire life, he's been raised by a slacker. He's been raised by someone who is not respected by authority, and so we understand there could be some past pain there.
No McFly ever amounted to anything in the history of Hill Valley.
So in this very quick scene, it's just Marty being caught by Strickland late for school. We've implemented 5 or 6 different things to make us like Marty. It's a great scene, even though it doesn't, on paper, there's no giant plot points here. There's no huge character development here. But as far as exposition working in a character likability light, this is a beautiful scene. The very next scene is Marty's band trying out for the school talent show, and really what this is setting up that Marty will play guitar at the end of the movie, right? But because the band doesn't make it because they're too loud, this is another good example. They don't make the cut here, so they're underdogs. And we also understand that Marty is going to continue playing his guitar, and that resiliency we latch onto as well. So here we're showing underdog and we're showing resiliency. So the very next scene, he is walking around the town square with Jennifer. He's licking his wounds.
Nah, I just don't think I'm cut out for music.
But you're good, Marty. You're really good. And this audition tape of yours is great.
So Marty's kind of bummed that he's getting rejected. And right now, we like him because he's self-aware. He says that, maybe this isn't even any good for me. Maybe I don't have a future here. And she tells him to stick with it. So she, as an outside element, she's saying that he has the talent to stick with it. So we like that. We like confirmation of talent by an outside party. That's nice. And then Marty sees a cool truck going into a shop across the street or something like that. And he's like, one day, Jennifer, you and me, we're going to have a truck like that. We're going to go out to the lake. It's going to be great. And so we like seeing Marty aspiring to the future, with his girlfriend, the noble goal of taking her on a nice date. What's kind of interesting about some of this stuff early on is that even though some of these things feel kind of like setups, they don't really play out. We don't really, see Marty take Jennifer to the lake that night because he goes on the journey. We don't see too much at school. We don't even see him in any classrooms. We don't really find out what happened to his band. We just know that it, kind of sets up for him playing Johnny Be Good at the end. And so a lot of these setups, even though they're setting up to things that we don't even see on screen, they're really being used more for this character likability aspect, and allowing us to bond with Marty before he goes on his journey. Another underdog element here, Jennifer asks him if his mom knows about going out tomorrow night.
Ah, get out of town. My mom thinks I'm going camping with the guys. Well, Jennifer, my mother would freak out if she knew I was going up there with you, and I get the standard lecture about how she never did that kind of stuff when she was a kid.
So we understand Marty wanting to be with his high school girlfriend, and his mother is overprotective. That is another, he's in high school, and that's, that's the underdog in high school. Your parents won't let you do certain things you want to do. So Marty's definitely the underdog here. And then we add some more comedy.
I think the woman was born a nun.
She's just trying to keep you respectable.
Well, she's not doing a very good job.
So again, a little bit of edge, some good comedy. We're enjoying watching Marty on screen. And then right before they're about to kiss, the older woman runs in there with the money, wanting them to fund the clock tower. And this is purely expositional. And again, the filmmakers get away with this pure exposition because Marty's response of kind of blowing her off, and he's like, hey, I'm in the middle of something here, is fun to watch. So we add comedy to exposition. It allows us to get through it. And then he donates to the clock tower to kind of get her to move along, which adds an element to the champion of the downtrodden. He's donating to a good cause. So even though he's just trying to get her out of the way, there is that scene of he's donating to an elderly person. And then the next bit is he kisses Jennifer and he sketches home on the back of a cop car. So we add a few things here. It's the cool factor. He's a cool high school kid kissing his girlfriend. He is sketching on the back of a cop car. So now we're adding a little bit of edge to that character as well. And it's also resourceful, the idea of sketching on a car. So we add a lot of likability points right there. And the very next bit is George's introduction.
You loaned me your car without telling me it had a blind spot. I could have been killed.
Now, Biff, I never noticed that the car had any blind spot before when I would drive it. Hi, son.
But what are you, blind, McFly? It's there. How else do you explain that wreck out there?
Now, Biff, can I assume that your insurance is going to pay for the damage?
Well, my insurance. It's your car. Your insurance should pay for it. I want to know who's going to pay for this. I spilled beer all over when that car smashed into me. Who's going to pay my cleaning bill?
So George is just getting completely bullied here. He's a complete doormat. And we see Marty kind of walk in the middle of that. And so what this does is, again, it establishes Marty as an underdog because now he doesn't have a car to take Jennifer out to the lake. It also establishes him as an underdog because his dad is such a loser. This guy is agreeing to pay for the other guy wrecking his car. So again, this idea of underdog and past pain, it's all kind of combined right there because, again, Marty has been living with George as a dad his whole life, and George is just such an incredible loser. And even though this scene is really George's introduction, we're seeing Marty observe everything. So Marty's reaction to this, what's unfolding, is really what we're getting out of the scene here. And the very next scene is a dinner scene, and it's Marty's mom's introduction, Lorraine. And this scene really does come off as a little long and a bit just exposition. There are some fun moments of comedy, but because we're not seeing a ton of Marty's interaction like we did in George's introduction, we're not really seeing how all this relates to Marty. So we're just seeing this kind of as a character introduction of Lorraine. The very next scene, Marty's in bed. He gets a call from Doc. He slept. He was supposed to stay up to meet with Doc. He accidentally slept. This scene, we see some comedy because he's sleeping in a funny way. But we also realize that Marty is helpful and reliable. So even though he kind of slept in, Doc asks him to go back to his place and pick up a camera to take the camera to the location, to the Twin Pines Mall. And so we like Marty because he's funny, and we like Marty because he's helpful or reliable. And then Marty shows up at the mall, And what does Marty do first thing? He goes and he pets Einstein. So we have a character petting a dog, so we think he must be a good person. So another silly little thing, but Back to the Future did it. Back to the Future had Marty pet a dog to add some of those character likability points. And then the very next little bit is Doc's intro. Now, Doc's intro is led with a DeLorean coming in for the first time, and there's a few moments of kind of light comedy there. We introduce Doc for the first time before we have the DeLorean hit 88 miles an hour and go back in time. So this is the stasis of Back to the Future. This is what the world is like before the world gets flipped upside down by the DeLorean going back in time. And so throughout this introduction, we're staying with Marty the entire time. And Marty is clever, he's resourceful, he's funny, he's an underdog with some past pain, he's helpful and reliable, he's cool, he has some edge. I mean, everything that you can think of to make a character likable, they specifically went in and made sure they checked all these boxes. That is why Marty McFly is one of the greatest characters of all time. They do such a good job of making us like Marty that we're totally rooting for Marty by the time he sits down in that DeLorean and takes off. So that was a quick overview of Back to the Future and how the filmmakers used so many different techniques to make us like Marty in the first 20 minutes of that movie.